Nice to see you as always, JD. You know I love our conversation, so let's get to it.
So I've got, I got a lot I want to get on. I want to get in with you. Let's start with Warsh. Let's start with Warsh Wednesday. Jay Woods and I chatted about it briefly earlier today. Your expectations for day one, obviously, I think we're still assuming we get the decision. We'll get some version of a press conference, but it's a whole new look without Mr. Powell at the helm for the first time in a while.
You know, it's funny. I remember Powell's first press conference very well compared to his predecessor. And you got this feeling that there's a new sheriff in town. And I think that's what we're going to get this time around as well. You know, I think everybody's waiting to see, does Warsh try to make some argument that policy should be a little more dovish than it needs to be? And I say that because we've all seen the inflation numbers, you know, not just the ones that we got this week, but really the last several months where we've seen both, you know, headline PPI march higher on a year-over-year basis, CPI do the same. There's other indications about companies trying to pass through price increases because their input prices are rising. It's a very inflationary environment. You know, the one thing I do wonder, JD, is do we get a U.S.-Iran peace deal signed ahead of the Fed's meeting? Does that give Warsh maybe some wiggle room to say that there are signs that, and I hate to use this word because it's a dirty word when it comes to the Fed, but dare he say it, these pressures are transitory.
I knew that was coming. I'm like, say it, say the T word. Here we go. So I wonder, you know, obviously Powell was, I think in many ways, a very disciplined messenger, would never take the bait on the politics questions. And there was no shortage of them during his tenure. But for the most part, I think especially for that core PCE, those main inflation readings, he said, hey, the goal is 2%. Do you expect that maybe Warsh comes in with a little bit of a different definition of what success looks like simply on the inflation side of the equation?
Well, he's already floated the notion that we should be looking at inflation in a different manner, you know, than we have. And I think that message actually turned off a lot of different people. You know, we have various ways of measuring inflation, then to come in and introduce one that shows, oh, maybe there's progress that we haven't seen before, that seems a little forced. So I'd be surprised if we actually wind up going that way. But we'll have to see. He's the chair. But we also have to remember, too, that he's only the chair and that decisions are made by committee. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, the C in FOMC does not stand for chairman.
Correct.
It stands for committee, Federal Open Markets Committee. There's still a group of them. Okay, dude, so I dug into this today because you texted me this. EPS All-Star Basket. Let's talk about its year-to-date, really its quarter-to-date performance. First of all, what exactly is the EPS All-Star Basket, the strategy? What should people know here?
So people should know that at Tematica, we have crafted a number of models that reflect various strategies. One of them is the EPS Diplomats / All-Stars, and it focuses on companies with a track record of significant earnings growth and prospects that to continue not just in the next quarter, but the next year, the next 2 years. And the basket itself is reconstituted every quarter. So every quarter, we take a fresh snapshot of the companies that meet those criteria. So it's very much a black box. There's no, I think this company, right? There's no investment opinion, we would say. It's all driven by the math.
Let's talk about a few of the, so is it market cap weighted? Remind me.
No, it's equal cap weighted at the start of the quarter, and where they run, and, you know, we'll reconstitute and rebalance the basket at the end of the quarter. So, you know, quarter to date, as of just a few minutes ago, the basket was up about 59%, the S&P 500 about 14. So some significant outperformance, but I'm happy to say, JD, it's not just this quarter. Since we started the strategy, it has outperformed the S&P 500 every quarter, either on an absolute basis or if the S&P has been down on a relative basis. So, you know, hands down, it's been a great performance.
We got some household names in there, including Micron. You guys can crash the live shot whenever you want during the show. No, you don't have to duck. You got Micron in there, Chris. Apologies. How about names like Credo and Bloom Energy driving returns as well? What do you see there?
No, I mean, look, those are all great names, all benefiting from, you know, the strategy that a lot of people are looking for from, you know, a thematic or fundamental perspective. AI adoption, you know, picks and shovels, building out. AI capacity, especially when it comes to Micron, where we know the industry's capacity constrained. I love pain point investing. That falls right into that category.
What do you think is the biggest risk right now to the overall EPS All-Star strategy?
I would say it's more the market and or concern about the AI, data center trade, although I hate that word because I think it's a multi-year tailwind. So to the extent that, like earlier in the week when we saw people getting concerned about all the billion-dollar deals that were getting done, when those names get a little shaky, some of the EPS diplomats will get a little shaky as well. But you know me, JD, I'm always collecting data points, signals, trying to suss out what is the long-term demonstrative tailwind that we want to position the overall portfolio. And of course, we'll see that flow through most likely on the EPS diplomats, because when the tailwinds are blowing, you want to be in line with companies that are well positioned for that, and that will fall on their business generating EPS growth.
Do you have a favorite data point? It could be something on a chart. It could be something you look for in earnings. What is one thing you've discovered, Chris Versace, over your career doing this that you said, you know what? That's really a gem. My eyes are trained to look for that before I look for anything else.
Wow, I got to give you two. So one obviously is EPS growth, given that strategy, and I believe your prior guest, Mr. Russo, also said that EPS growth drives stocks higher over the long term. So there's clearly that, but we also know that there can be some, let's say, monkey business below the operating line. So for me, I always tend to focus in on operating earnings and operating margin expansion.
Okay, very nice. So we got a few minutes left, dude. I got to get your take on how you're thinking as a portfolio manager. Obviously, SpaceX will have this maybe I'll call it controversial, NASDAQ 100 inclusion. So any indexes that have exposure there. Jay Woods and I were talking at the top of the hour, though, Chris, to be fair, it's probably 1% or less, probably less than that. So you'll have some exposure, but not a whole lot. How do you think about a listing like this? I would assume part of you says to let the dust settle a little bit, but we've never seen something to this scale.
No, we have not, and I think it's going to be a wild ride when it first opens. Kind of as a rule over at the Street Pro portfolio, we don't touch IPOs. Typically my strategy when it comes to IPOs is let the lockup expiration come and go, and then consider it. And I think that'll probably be what we do here as well. There are other space plays out there if you want to be in on that, and yes, Tematica does have a space model. But we're not going to chase this deal. The real thing is, JD, where does it settle out in the next several days? You can talk about space, but when you really dig into the S1 filing, this is probably the biggest AI company that is not making money to come to market. It's going to have implications for how people start to think about the pricing for OpenAI, Anthropic, and if what I'm hearing is true, Perplexity when it comes public in 2027.
So let me get your take on the option side of this. Obviously, heads up, fellas, I'm on that camera right there. Thank you. So let me get your take on the option side. Obviously, our good mutual friend, Bob Lang, really the option specialist here, but options will start for the stock on Tuesday. It's just one day before the first Warsh press conference and FOMC decision. It's a day before VIX expiration. How much of that, if at all, is on your radar for what those next few days will look like as we turn ahead to next week?
You know what? I would throw in, so those are all on the radar screen, but the other is whether or not we actually get this U.S.-Iran deal. There's some pushback on it today, and I think the market is kind of chewing in on that a little bit. To me, it's, do we get a deal? If we get a deal, more importantly, and you know what I'm going to say, the details will matter. Are we getting just a framework? Are we getting an extension of a ceasefire? Are we getting a real deal? When does the Strait of Hormuz open? When is the oil really going to flow? These are the things we need to know.
The details? No, when are we talking about details with this stuff here, Chris Versace? Come on. Before I let you go, from the days when you and I were both at the Street together, and I used to do a lot of interviews with you about your thinking and the holdings in the portfolio, you were the first person to ever kind of take me to school years ago about Marvell. And man, oh man, every time I hear the name Marvell, which is impossible for me to escape now in my day-to-day, I'm like, man, that Chris Versace, and I know this has been a high conviction play for you. What did you see in that name in particular several years ago, and how are you thinking about it today?
Still like it. We still own it in the pro portfolio, although I would admit that we have, dialed it back a little bit, taking gains along the way. But the drivers behind it really, the AI and data center build out, the ramping custom AI chip business, and the notion that as AI adoption and more importantly usage accelerates, it's going to pressure networks, fostering incremental capacity needs. All of that still remains true. And I think we've got a multi-year winner ahead of us.
That's incredible. Chris, anything else big on your radar, upcoming catalysts you're paying attention to that you think we would benefit from also focusing a little bit more?
I really think out after next week, it's going to be, what do we start to hear about earnings? The market's been on a rocket ship ride. The expectations for the second half of the year in terms of EPS growth, it's north of 20% on a year-over-year basis. Yet when we see, some of the pressures that are happening, not just price increases, but margins and consumers starting to potentially dial back a little bit, I think we want to get some clarity on those second half expectations. Again, S&P 500 consensus EPS numbers.
Chris Versace, very grateful for your time, dude. It's really good to see you. My best to you, my best to your family. Chris, before I let you go, where can people go if they want to see more of your stuff?
Probably the two best places are going to be at the Street Pro, so pro.thestreetpro.com, and then over at Tematica, over at the Substack we have.
Chris Versace, I really was very sorry to miss you. I think it was last Monday. You were down here for Taking Stock. We were all dialed up to do the interview. I had a personal thing go on at home. I could not see you here, but I know you did a great interview with my colleague, Ashley Astronardi. So I hope to see you again next time you're down here on the floor. Hope you enjoy your weekend, and let's see what those Knicks got in store tomorrow night.
You will be my first call, JD. Don't worry.
The great Chris Versace. Cha-ching. We'll talk again soon. Very grateful for you, Chris Versace, longtime friend of mine.